All right, so we're back with the days of Noah. We're in 5c now, and we are still discussing some common things and themes in history that are associated with fallen angels and extraterrestrial interference into our world. So, you know, we need to find out, how did we get to the place where we began to ignore information about these fallen angels, these extraterrestrial people, where we began to forget what really happened and the atrocities that were taking place in our world when they were present. We've come to a place where we just, many are accepting now, and they've had to, some, because it's just in our face at this point. But where we went from being oblivious to these things, which meant, they lost some of their glory and power, and hey, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But with that being said, we entered into some amnesia to the point where we're denying so many things about history, denying the Bible and the truth in it. And now we're finding ourselves going around the mountain of the days of Noah without even realizing it, without having a clue to what we're actually, what's actually going on right now. So moving on, we need to understand and remember that this was a time where people suffered at the hands of this past interaction, and there was child sacrifice going on. The promotion of sexual deviancy was happening. The destruction and overconsumption of Earth's resources was taking place. And additional evidence that just points to a past that is jaded by extraterrestrial invasion and abuse. Presently, there is, so much evidence that it should help us to steer clear of repeating history. It's also clear in numerous texts now that what the earth has buried in its ages of soil is that the sons of God are angelic watchers who originally left heaven and eventually had sexual intercourse with human women, leading to the forbidden hybrid creation of giant Nephilim offspring who consumed man's resources, raped, cannibalized, sodomized, and ultimately wreaked havoc on the earth. Their account as heroes of old, such as reinvented by Hollywood, are based on mythological lore and stories that reflect them as heroes, and not just heroes if we pay attention to some of these stories, because they were rulers of nations at a time. And as God himself allowed them to be, or even mysteriously appointed them to be, as it is written. The heroic stories that were told to their fame was to make sure they were remembered throughout time as helpers of mankind. Yet, their fame is ill-gotten gain. As long as movies indoctrinate people blindly into the history of extraterrestrials being a largely positive, enlightening intercourse with mankind as heroes of old, they further blind and mislead the people from the true story, as they have done for so long. Blinding people to the truth. Religious people, leaders, blinding people to the truth as well. If you don't even think about these things, then you won't be aware when your world is just showing you that there's a day that was before on the horizon. And biblically speaking, it says it's not just as in the days of Noah that it will be in the coming of the Son of Man, but it will be a day that no one has ever even seen before, because now we're talking about the end of the world instead of just the end of an age and what that means, right? We are still understanding what that means. There's so much more to it, and it is a progression over time. an explosion can happen in an instant, but if it's a premeditated thing, it could be a laid out plan that led to this point over time until we're boom, now we just see the effects of it, right? But what if the story of the fallen angel watchers and their progenitors was a story that would actually frighten us all to death if it was conceived as reality? What if our desire to be free of God is the desire that causes us to open back up Pandora's box and bring this old world to life again in a new way? Could the truth prevent us from trying to resurrect this ancient world of alien beings as a new world of progression towards knowing all things so that we may ourselves be like the gods? Society has already opened Pandora's box, and we have already opened the door for a new world that only is birthed out of the old dead one. Only we are led to become like the gods who deceived and abused mankind and brought catastrophe instead of becoming like the holy ones who bring true life and light. So now that we've established, this fallen angelic history of extraterrestrials in our earth, let's start to lean in on some character traits here, some fruit of these trees. When we dig into the true history, we're going to talk about a common evil, right? And an uncommon awareness. And so when we dig into true history of our planet, we can discover more common denominators that have their roots in reproducing issues that eventually lead the soul to its own death and destruction. Now we're talking about death of the soul, not just of the flesh. Sodom and Gomorrah was a reflection of this common evil that was unleashed on the planet in the days of Noah. In Jude chapter 1, verse 7, it mentions the violation of the strange flesh, which has been considered by some as homosexuality. While it is not exactly homosexuality, it has roots there. The strange flesh referred to is the mixing of angelic beings with humans. So aliens and humans having sex and even reproducing, producing offspring, which God stopped after the judgment of the flood. They could no longer come and procreate with women. But today in our scientific community, we have genetic modification taking place, right? Where we're cloning and we're taking people's genes and their DNA. And there are stories, countless stories of people who are being, so to speak, abducted, right? That's what they're saying. They're being abducted. Genetic mutations are being experimented on them. They're being experimented on. There are stories of people who are being abducted and they are saying they are genetically experimented upon. They are suffering terrible pain. Yes, they are traumatized, but what's taking place is they are being experimented upon. And there's even stories, they even have a documentary on Netflix about it. And people can just blow it off as much as they want to. But again, there are so many accounts of this happening. People who feel like they've been taken off the planet or being taken really in a subterranean world, and being experimented upon from extraterrestrials. And a lot of these people have reported sexual, some type of sexual deviation going on, something where they are trying to procreate. Basically, people have stories where they are taking their genes and they are trying to procreate with each other. Stories of people who are being taken, abducted, experimented upon, and hidden places by beings, entities that are alien to them in this planet. And they are genetically mixing with them and trying to create another species from them. There are stories everywhere. Where there's smoke, there's fire, people. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So we're dealing with mass a mass deception in so many areas that it is almost hard to wrap your head around. But the good news is God had watchers. They were angels who were watchers. And they were said to fall, some of them, and do some of the things that were against God's will. And God has watchers still, right? And he has people in the earth like me, and like you possibly, and others who are watching and reporting on these things so we can keep up with what's going on. And so they're being revealed, and they're not, they may be harder to find, but they're being unearthed left and right. And that's why people like myself are getting on YouTube and sharing at this point, because we want to report what God is revealing. So he's trying to help us. He's trying to help us to not fall for the same booby trap again and again and again. So the goodness of God is really something that is unfathomable. Anyhow, so this strange flesh, this mixing. Now, we're going to start to jump into some additional evidence of strange flesh. In Sodom and Gomorrah, the biblical account records that when Abraham asked that God save some people before the town was burned down and destroyed for being overrun with impurity, immorality, and sexual perversion, the first thing the men did when they saw the angels arrive to town was they wanted to have sex with them. So in this story of Abraham, God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. He's going to wipe it out for their wickedness and their sexual perversion and deviancy from truth and light and love. And the first thing, that speaks to the nature of what's permeated this whole city is that immediately we have angels coming to town to save and rescue a family. These men don't know that, but what they do know is that we have new men in town, and immediately they are lusting after these men. And these are men lusting after these angelic males and wanting to have sex with them. Okay. This is an odd desire considering angelic beings are in your presence. So already we see the perverted nature of people, so much so that a supernatural being comes into the city and you are lusting after them sexually because you are men desiring men, and you see what look like men, but they are angels, and you don't even, discern that this is wrong. So it's an odd desire, considering they're angels, but most people may not identify with the overwhelming sexual desire to intercourse with what you know as an angel in your midst. There's a perversion in that thinking. In reality, if the angel looks like a human, only having more prominent and beautifully flawless features, you may feel an attraction. In this story, though, the attraction for the same sex only edified the men's desire for the male angels. The story records that they didn't even want Lot's daughters, but they wanted the men and the angels. Again, they wanted the strange flesh that was long ago forbidden to mix. So, catch that if you can. We're talking about strange flesh, okay? And we're talking about the strange flesh originally starts here with the perversion of mixing one species with another, right? Genetic mixing. And here in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, we have men lusting after men to the point where when an angel comes, they're even lusting after that angel because it's represented in the male form. And so that's a connection right there to the lusting after strange flesh, the mixing that's forbidden, and that's what they're after. They're after that. So there's a reason why these are connected to each other. And my time is running out for part 5c, but we're going to start part 6. We're going to end part 5 and go into part 6 and carry this story on And I will see you in part 6. God bless.